We are live.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another exciting week in Adventures in Truth. Here tonight with my buddy Jeff. Dr. Jeff is in the house, and
Hello.
our third wheel Timothy is off and about wandering the planet. I think he's currently in Singapore somewhere. And so we're carrying forward tonight. Came across a video this week with... funny thing, didn't really know who it was until a couple days after I listened to it, because I didn't read it and I didn't recognize him. But it was a video by Dr. Joe Dispenza, and it was the title of the video is something to do with why we're not happy. But he dives really deeply into a lot of concepts that we talk about here on the show, but one of the things that he talked about specifically that I think that I wanted to bring here, and because it so closely aligns with where we've been the last couple weeks in talking about trauma and talking about truth, is this one quote that I want to pull that we could start from, is that you can't think greater than how you feel, which I think is an incredibly powerful statement. It directly correlates to many things that I've encountered, and in particular some of the things that we've encountered particularly in law of attraction, where the conversation always goes to people trying to understand why do I have to feel it before I create it? So if I want love in my life, why do I have to feel love first before I get the love? And the explanation was always the same, in that it was this idea that you're creating momentum, you're creating an energy. So if you're generating this love energy, then what's got to come back is love energy. So you're creating your momentum by finding the space of love in your own field, and then that grows and expands and attracts to it more of the same. But conversely, the same thing happens in the negative spin cycle, that when we are always focused in the negativity of life, or feeling victimized, or not being able to successfully find a relationship or a job, and we go into that negative spin, the same thing happens. You're creating you're creating a center of gravity, or you're creating a core vibration that is resonating that, and that's what comes back into your life, which is not relationships, and not good jobs, and not all the things that don't serve. So his speaking to it in this term of you can't think greater than how you feel, really, to me, speaks to the core of this issue, which is, if you're in anger, you can't think your way out of being angry. If you're depressed, you're not going to think your way out of being depressed. Nor are you going to go from being depressed to being happy in one fell swoop. There's a certain amount of steps that you have to go through up the emotional tone scale in finding a more neutral place to be, and a less emotionally focused place. So going from anger to resentment, from resentment to something less than resentment to something that's more neutral, you walk your way through that.
Yeah. Isn't that the vortex that Abraham talks about?
Well, I think the vortex encompasses all of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's that, to me, that vortex is that core vibration. It's that place where all of creation exists, and in particular your individual universe of creation,
right,
based on your vibration. Yeah.
So I mentioned that because there are multiple ways of looking at this concept, and sometimes we put out an alternative way of envisioning a concept. It's the vortex, has a big center, and it has a cone that comes down to a fine point at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And the fine point is the detail of, I'm angry about this, and you can't get to the center, or even the opposite of the cone that goes upward. So you have like two snow cones, you put one on top of each other.
Yeah.
You can't get into the positive light side, like you said, in one fell swoop. You have to go from the specific to the general, and then to the specific of how you want to feel. And it is a conscious, active process.
And it's something that they address very specifically in that languaging, is when you're feeling good, be more specific. When you're feeling bad, be more general. Because you got to, shifting that energy,
right,
you got to expand it. You got to dissipate. You got to move it out so that you can gain
Yeah.
a greater perspective.
Yep. When we get bit by a mosquito, we scratch, not on the site, the exact and only spot of the bite, but all those little neurons around that. It's like you stimulate them and it literally spreads out the irritant. And so we'll scratch much more than just a general, a specific area. To, like you said, dissipate that.
Yeah.
And it works both at the body level and the mind level. I was rude and interrupted. You were talking about Joe's work and working up the scale of emotions, and I just had this impulsive need to jump in there and throw out.
No, that's what the conversation is about. That's why we do this.
I'm hoping that you can recage the conversation back to that point, because I know you got a bunch more good stuff to share with us.
Well, it's starting at the point of you can't think greater than how you feel. For me, was such a it's such a foundational thing. One, because it addresses the significance of how we think and feel, and realizing that it isn't all about thought and it isn't all about feeling, that the truth lies somewhere between the two. Because he likes to talk about emotions like circuits that get fired, and when the circuit fires, it creates this reaction, it creates this response, it creates this experience, and the more you focus on that, then the mind engages, and the mind wants to go to understanding why. And the more that you attach to understanding why it's happening, the more you're allowing that emotion to continue to incubate, or what's the word he used? Refractory period, is that what it was? That when you're in that reacting period, I think he called refractory period. Are you familiar with that term?
Yes. Not in that context, but I'm familiar with the term. Maybe we could push into that a little bit.
Well, the way he talked about it was that when the emotions are released or experienced, they create a physiological response. So his version is that chemically you become within the boundaries of the emotions. So the emotion sets the stage, the brain tries to tell a story, and there's a period that the longer you do that, the more impact that has on how you train your energy system and your body. And specifically, the part that I loved was that he addressed it to the idea of cellular memory, in that what we're doing, in that he likened the physical body to the physical expression of the subconscious mind, which I thought was pretty powerful. Was it subconscious or unconscious? Oh, gotta check.
We can use those together.
But his thought process and the way he expressed it is that it's and that because of, and this is where I'm connecting dots, that because of the cellular memory aspect, it's like programming individual. You're constantly programming these cells, these parts of the body, all throughout the body, that they begin to resonate and vibrate to whatever vibration you're bringing to the table. So it's not that it's just a function of this half of the brain or that half of the brain, or the heart is only expressing here. It's once that emotion moves through the body, it's consumed by the entire body. It's absorbed into the entire experience, and that it then the cells begin to learn behavior from that, so that whenever they experience that feeling, it triggers this set of experiences that puts you right back into this place of what he said earlier, which I have to keep going back to. You can't think greater than how you feel. That once that field of emotion is established, what you do from there is critical. Because the choices you make, the longer you stay in that, what he called the refractory period, in the reaction period, the more deeply trained your body and your energy become to that experience. And that speaks to what you were talking about with regard to trauma, in some regard.
I'm trying to understand the refraction part, and there's two thoughts I have about in order for us to feel like we've done justice to his concepts, I think, for me anyway, if we both feel like we got it, then we can convey that to our listeners, that they would get it too. So I'd like to step back for a second, and I had two things come to me while you were sharing about refraction and refractory periods. If you're standing in a creek and you're looking at fish, say you're knee deep in water, and you're in a creek and you have a spear gun or a spear and you're trying to spear a fish, because of the way light refracts in water, it actually, if the sun's here, I'm moving my hand at an angle and the striking
So we're saying
the
45
water.
degrees.
If you take a stab at where your eye sees the fish isn't there because of the refraction, and and it's really hard to do that because the eye can't gauge where that angle really is.
So, refractory period, they identify it as a noun in physiology. A period immediately following stimulation during which a nerve or muscle is unresponsive to further stimulation.
So I understand that was, you beat me to the second point.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's great. That's a great lead-in, a great segue. So the refractory period is the fourth stage in the four stages of the psychosexual response cycle. So you have, for a man, it would initially be some form of arousal, usually visual. For a woman, it would be auditory or kinesthetic. The next stage becomes stimulation, where now the body, so the first stage is just mental. The second stage, nipples will harden, nostrils will open, eyes will dilate, heart rate will increase, vagina will lubricate, penis engorges with blood. That's stage 2, stimulation. Stage 3, orgasm, ejaculation. Stage 4 is the refractory period. So each one of those has a whole, there's like 9 neurotransmitters, hormones, and enzymes that are taking place in that sexual response cycle. So you remember the song called Love Potion Number 9? I think that was ironic and maybe a coincidence that was written that way. I don't know that they knew the neuroanatomy or neurophysiology, but it was just interesting to me that it was, you can kind of think of it that way.
Yeah.
But the thing I like to ask people to consider is there's a whole lot going on in the brain and in the body during that period of time. The fourth stage is the refractory stage. And that's where, because like in the male body, between stage 1 and stage 2, the penis in stage 1 is still used for eliminating toxins, otherwise known as urine. In stage 2, there's like a guy on the railroad tracks that flips a lever and gets the vas deferens to, instead of going to the bladder, it goes to the testicles to eliminate semen and sperm. And that's a physical function that actually happens there, a physiological function that post-orgasm has to go back to the way it was in the beginning, which is what we call the refractory period. And oftentimes, younger in life, the refractory period could be a matter of minutes before a man's ready to go again, to go through that whole thing all over again. But there is a point in time where, even with stimulation, there's no response. And I think that's what he's talking about. And women will get to a point where they just will push you away because you've stimulated them as much as they can tolerate, and they have to have a little bit of a break in some cases, I guess if you're really good, to let them calm down for a moment before they're wanting to continue for more. But that's a physiological expression of all of those enzymes, neurotransmitters, and hormones matching up with the nervous system to get it to calm down, to re-baseline, so that you can start through that process again. So if we now take that and we look at what's going on in the mind with regard to story and with regard to trauma, with regard to experience, which is where, to me, we're using all of those things to say that's what truth is, and that's what our truth is, even though those may not be good variables to use as what truth is, and that's kind of why last week I was saying I'm kind of at the place where I don't think truth exists as a standard, or even something that we could say you and I agree on, because in some cases we would probably have a deviation in what we thought we agreed on, but we really don't, because we've had different traumas, different experiences, different filters. And
well, even in our conversations about looking at different aspects of our own lives, you know, we come together on major concepts, but the expression of how that happens, there are things that you allow for in your experience because of the choices that you make that I don't allow for, because they're not a part of my lexicon. They're not a part of my it doesn't fit my bigger picture. So where you would make different choices, we're still going to the same destination, but you're going in a different
Yep.
going about it a different way, because your background and experience are vastly different than mine, you know, and so that's kind of cool. But I was looking at this again, trying to so let's migrate from sex to emotion and see how we can connect those dots in the emotional body.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to talk about sex because everybody likes to talk about that, and everybody likes to listen to it, and maybe somebody learned something, right? Sex sells, right? It's awesome.
Mm-hmm. No, that's
Wouldn't it be interesting if there was some correlation between what Joe was talking about and just the basic sexual response cycle? That there's arousal, stimulation, the expression of the experience that we would call orgasm, and then the refractory period. I don't know that he laid it out that way, but wouldn't it be interesting if that's kind of where that comes from?
Yeah, and I'm trying to think, because I think he's borrowing the term for sure. I mean, because the way I heard it was the refractory period is where things should reset to normal, but they don't, because the chemical piece, the emotions when they release stimulate a chemical response in the body. Some positive, some negative, depending on what emotion you're experiencing, I guess. But what he's saying is that the chemistry that you're experiencing is within the boundary of those emotions that you're experiencing. So it's not the same for every emotion. The chemical is not, the chemical response is. And the refractory period came after that in the conversation. In the way I heard it was the emotions set off a chemical response in the body. The longer that you stay in that, he called it the refractory period. So the longer, that's where I'm a little bit confused now based on your description.
Well, that simply means I can't be stimulated. It's the point at which further stimulation doesn't create a response. I mean, think about a woman performing oral sex on a man after he's had an orgasm. She can do whatever she wants to it, and that thing ain't getting hard again, right? Yeah. This is no longer a PG-rated conversation, right? Not necessarily X, but
well, so help me take it to a non-sexual place, because it's easy to see it there. What's the refractory period on an emotional trauma? So at what point? So if I'm understanding what you're saying is that there's the initial emotional experience that's experienced chemically, it's experienced physically, it's experienced mentally. Then there is a point where that stimulation is no longer felt.
So here's how I understand what I think he's saying.
Okay.
Once we're triggered, so remember the trigger happens in the amygdala, the thalamus, and hypothalamus.
Okay.
Thalamus, hypothalamus are the thumbs going, hey, are you okay? Are you okay? Yeah, everything's fine. And then there's a bump, thump, a smell or something, and they go, oh, something's not okay. And the amygdala supplies all the times that something like that has happened before, which furthers the it's not okay, and now there's a problem, Houston. There's a problem, right? Right? So then the signal goes to the autonomic nervous system that says there's two branches here, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. Parasympathetic is going to either fight or run away. Sympathetic is going to freeze and do nothing. So there's a branch that takes place there. So what I'm hearing Joe say is we go from fight or run away into freeze mode, into the do nothing, stop, drop, and roll,
Yes.
curl up in the fetal position,
Yes.
just cry, just I can't do this anymore, just go numb. And I hear that all the time, particularly with borderlines. Their thyroid will freeze up or a swell. It's like they can't get their words out, and they literally go brain dead. They go stupid, and nothing makes any sense to them. And it's sad because there aren't any tigers chasing them. It's all the big mind F in the going on in the noggin here. So does that help? So there's some kind of a switch between the fight, flight, and the freeze mode that's getting activated with too much stimulation, too much, because somebody can only beat on you so long. Even in the animal kingdom, the bunny rabbit will eventually go limp and literally go from run mode, run away, to the cheetah now has me in the grasp of its claws, and I go limp, and as soon as I go limp, the cheetah thinks it's dead, and I lay there on the ground for a minute, and I open up one eye, because the cheetah's going, and I jump up and run away again.
Right.
And so that can be stop pounding on me, stop beating on me. Mm-hmm. Women will cry, and it'll get men to stop pounding, beating emotionally, hopefully not physically. And we'll have sympathy. It'll reactivate our mind to stop that. Am I rambling or?
No. We're missing something. I'm not.
So I think you were asking for that. We got it in the physical with sex, and you were asking for how would that make sense in an emotional trauma way. And so if somebody was arguing, there would be a point at which the stimulation was so great that they could not do that any longer. They've had their orgasm, and now they're in the refractory period that would seem like that would be the freeze response. I'm saying you could use freeze response and refractory synonymously.
Yeah, I can see that. What I'm looking for is, so, because my impression was, and maybe I misinterpreted how he was expressing it, but my impression is that refractory period is a place where people end up staying because they aren't dealing with the emotion. They aren't dealing with the chemistry that's happened. So they go to Numbsville,
mm-hmm.
but then as soon as somebody says cheese, because that's their trigger word, they're 400% in again. It's right there. It's right, which I think I kind of thought that was where you were seeing the effect of trauma and the ramifications of trauma through it, but maybe not.
So there's a period at which dopamine is going to fire off the fight runaway mode, and norepinephrine, and there's another one, I'm blanking on it right now. There's another neurotransmitter that will override that to get you into the freeze mode. And until those chemicals are reuptaked, I know that's not proper English, but we call them reuptake mechanisms. Until they're like sponges, they gather those up again in the cerebral fluid. It would be like you pour a bottle of Jack Daniels straight on my brain. Mm-hmm. You're going to get an instant response from me that I'm intoxicated. So,
is that real?
What is real?
Is that a for real thing? I mean,
oh yeah, if you do alcohol straight to the brain, people that have had like a gastric bypass, you can get them shit-faced drunk on one beer because it doesn't go through the whole. It goes straight to the brain. It enters the bloodstream so much more quickly because it doesn't have like 3 feet.
But you couldn't put a straw in the brain and drop Jack in the brain and get drunk.
Through the bloodstream, if you could put it straight in so it crosses the blood-brain barrier, and you could get it to bypass the stomach and the intestines and everything.
In some form or another, it has to be absorbed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But where I was going with that is the only way to not be under the influence would be to absorb that, and we'd use the kidneys and the liver to do that, but that happens in the brain with enzymes, neurotransmitters, and hormones. There's these little wheels at the end of each neuron and dendrite that are like turnstiles that you go through at a department store, and they sit in those little spaces, and as they spin, they gather up those neurotransmitters, hormones, and enzymes into the neuron to then, pass that information along again. So the only way to get that out of the cerebral fluid is to get those reuptake mechanisms activated to pull in all the activated chemicals that are out there, to getting the people to switch from fight to freeze. And then before you can fight again, all the freeze chemicals have to be gathered up. They have to be. And then more dopamine has to get released to get you to fight again. And you could literally do that with injections. You could get a person to go, I don't have energy to do anything. I want to beat the shit out of you. And then right back, if you could manipulate the chemical responses that fast, all of this could be described and demonstrated chemically. But we also have story in there, and there's obviously a time delay because we can't activate those switches and we can't put those chemicals in quite that quickly. So it all gets slowed down.
Well, and he likened that whole the mind's portion of this is the desire to understand why, or the desire.
I'm interested that you wanted to put the alcohol into the brain through a straw, and I'm wondering, was that a plastic straw or is that one of these new paper straw things? Sorry, but I had to go.
No. It was just the way that you said it. I went, you could pour alcohol in the brain and get drunk.
No, that was a metaphor.
I get it. It took me a minute, but I got it.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's all right. No. It was good. I was like, wait, that's a piece of science I hadn't heard before. I'm curious. I didn't know that could happen. So, yeah, this is so interesting because it's way deeper than I expected, I guess. I mean, some of the things that he talks about that when we started this with, you can't think greater than how you feel. And he was talking about, he likens a lot of things into this sort of computer model, this sort of idea of programs and circuits, and one of the other things that he said that I thought was very powerful is that once you've programmed the system and you're living through that program, because he's saying 95% of who we are at 35 years old, 95% of who we are is a memorized set of behaviors, activities, thoughts, experiences, emotions. It's all just rote and repetition. And so in this process of having these emotional responses and then not dealing with the response and then creating a story and then storing that information and holding that information in place, which I kind of thought was a little bit about that refractory, is this holding on to. Is that not?
Yeah.
Is that part of it? A little bit?
Holding on to because you're still stimulated in the freeze mode, and we call that like a brain fog, or I call that being stuck on stupid. And until those chemicals are gathered up, you're gonna be there. No good choices are made there.
Well, but that speaks to pretty much everything anymore that you hear about, at least in my own experience too, is once you start, regardless of where you are in the process of consciousness or understanding consciousness, as soon as you engage a trigger, as soon as you engage that process, you have to go full cycle. You can't get out of it unless you catch it very early. And I think he used those words. If you catch it early in the refractory period and you don't spend time there, then you're not building those habits. You're not building those memories. You're not building you're not training your tissues.
Yeah.
You're simply having an experience, moving through the experience, and moving on.
Yeah.
But the challenge is that when you stop doing that, when you're too long in that period, and it doesn't resolve, then things like the way he said it, you lose free will to the program you created. And I love that thought.
Me too.
I love that expression because, again, it ties to, as we talked about earlier with law of attraction, you lose free will to the program being the chemistry of the emotional reaction that you're harboring or that you're continuing to recycle. And to me, the idea of the feeling is, yeah, you lose free will, but we tend to want to put that outside of ourselves. And to his point, this has nothing to do with anything outside of yourself. This is you creating you. And so this loss of feeling of free will is us shutting down our own freedom.
Right. For me, free will is, there is only now. When I get into this what is free will thing, there is only this moment. And I know you've said that before, so I think we're pretty much aligned on that.
Yep.
There is only now. And free will can only be experienced now. If I have any kind of story going on, any kind of trigger taking place, I'm not in the now. And there is no free will.
Or future, yeah. There's no free will there.
Mm-hmm.
It was the other conversation we had about free will. The misconception of free will is that it's the choices that you have in any given moment that execute free will, not this universal, the things that are available to you,
Mm-hmm.
the things that are available to me based on choices I've made, based on the emotional experience, based on the content of my energy. Free will means I have, within this certain spectrum, as many choices as there are within that spectrum. It doesn't mean I have the free will of every single thing, of every single thing, of every single thing. Because I haven't programmed or even trained myself to be that available. So it was Tom Campbell that said
Mm-hmm.
it. The misconception of free will is that it has not to do with being able to do anything and everything you want. It has to do with the choices that you can make within the spectrum of what you've created so far.
Yeah. I know we probably don't want to take the conversation in that direction,
No,
but the
I
term
just-
of, most of the time when people hear the concept or term of free will, they're thinking of it with regard to spirituality or religion, and the idea that we've been given free will, but you have to follow this set of rules, or there's going to be this really nasty place that you're going to go to, is not free will.
Right.
Which is like, just kind of the irony behind Christianity or other religions promoting this concept of God gives us free will, but that could only be truly given if there were no expectations for you to follow a list of rules or behave in a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
without the fear of there being some retribution that's going to kick your ass in a place that you don't want to go.
Yeah, and that doesn't even really hold logic, let alone common sense or anything else. But
And on that note, I personally want to get to a place where the people that are in my life, both on the inner circle and on the outer circle, that I could give them the space and the liberty to be who they are and do what they're going to do, and still be able to love them, even if they're not following my list of rules or desires or expectations. And that over time they might learn the consequences of operating in their free will doesn't benefit our relationship, so then that wouldn't work. Or that they would choose to negotiate what is helpful for the relationship and what is not, so that we could both be or all be operating in this thing called free will. And we're doing it because we know that it's just gold standard behavior, or it just works really well. Or we have openness and we have trust, and don't have to live in fear that I've got this piece of my personality that I have to keep hidden because you might not like it and would judge me for it. I know that I got off track, so now we might be back on track again. I just needed to put that out there for whatever reason. Free will. That was under the topic of free will. So many different ideas come up when I hear that concept of free will. What is it?
well, because it's been so expounded upon as this as you have free will, so that means you have unlimited opportunity to everything.
Mm-hmm. Remember last week
Except-
we tossed out the idea that I can't hurt you without hurting myself at the same time. I have free will to do that, but there's no free lunch.
Right.
It's got, something has to come from somewhere, and if you're operating in kind of a shitty place, then you're in shit too. It's your free will to do that. And
Yep. So, as we continue down the pathway here of you can't think greater than you feel. That seems to be, I can't think of anywhere that's not true. In anything, that wouldn't be the reality of as one of those sort of capital T truths.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it shows up in different ways depending on who the teacher is that's presenting it, but whether it's such a, to me, it's such a powerful kind of secret in that when you understand that guidance system that we have called emotions, that you begin to not take them as seriously as they appear to be. Because you can recognize the chemistry that's going off in your body. You can recognize, and I'm not saying this is true of every situation, because sometimes the trigger happens before your brain can even engage that the trigger took place, I think. But I think that as you get more conscious, even if the trigger goes, there's a mechanism that we all have that enables us to stop. And it's one of those core principles that if the energy is moving in a direction, especially in a downward direction, stop and step back. Don't ever engage the energy going in the wrong direction. Because as soon as you do, you can't get off. You can't, that's a ride, you got to ride to the end. Or at least as far to the end as
and the end would be until those reuptake mechanisms are pulling all those chemicals back out of the free-flowing cerebral fluid, just having their way on you. Again, if you dump a half a bottle of Jack in my throat and I swallow it and it goes through, it's going to do what it's going to do. Mm-hmm. There is no way to speed up that process. You can drink coffee.
Right, you can't undo it either.
You can't, right. You're along for the ride.
Right.
And so the best you can do is isolate yourself until, because anything you say and do under that influence will be used against you in a court of relationship, right?
Anywhere, yeah.
Yes,
anywhere. It's a really good way to say that, because that's absolutely the truth. You will continue to make the same error.
That's, to me, the ultimate stuck on stupid. In my counseling practice, 10 years ago, I built this model and reduced it to a single page. And I used the analogy of asking people to imagine a 10-story building. And where I'm going right now is connected to this concept you've gone to several times of you can't think any differently than the state you're in. Something like that? What did it actually say?
I have to look at my notes because I keep not imprinting it. You can't think greater than how you feel.
Okay. So imagine a 10-story building. Mm-hmm. On levels 1 through 3, and there's an elevator. And the elevator is what floor, it takes you to what floor you're on. And the floors in my model are, you got 3 green floors, floors 1 through 3. 4 through 6 are yellow floors, and the red floors are on the top. And these are the universal colors of green. At the very bottom, I'm in love, I'm in peace, I'm in community, like floors 1, 2, 3. Off the top of my head, it's been a while since I've looked at the model, and it's kind of funny because even though it's mine and I wrote it, it's one of those use it or lose it things. But periodically I get it out and I share it with other people to give this example of you have to be aware of what floor you're on as to where the conversation is going and where you're operating from.
Yeah.
So let's keep going with the model. Let's go up the floors. Let's ride the elevator. So ideally, you'd always want to be on level 1. Well, Jesus couldn't even pull off level 1. There's a scripture where he went into the palace and they were selling doves and cows and things for profit, and he turned over the tables and apparently got his whip out, and I'd like to see Jesus with the bullwhip. Come on, whip him! Whip him Whip him good. That's where Devo got that line from when they wrote their song. Devo and Jesus, they're working it out together.
That's funny.
So even Jesus couldn't stay at level 1. or floor 1. So you get up into the yellow zone, and you're no longer hostile, but you're irritated, agitated, frustrated, resentful. And then you get onto that 7th floor, 7, 8, 9, 10, and it's no longer resentment. It's now like, I'm angry. I'm really pissed off. I'm feeling physically violent. And, then the top floor would be, I just have rage and enmity toward this person, and I want him off the planet. And so there's there's this building block of all these floors, and they're colored, and all the words line up from what I'm thinking to what I'm feeling to what I'm doing. And so they all line up. So I think I love you, so I want to hug you. I think I love you, I'm feeling love, I want to hug you. So there's the thought, the feeling, the behavior. And then you bump it up. I really like you, I want to shake your hand, I want to have a nice conversation with you, kind of thing. And then the third level is, I really have affection toward you, I'm feeling connected with you, and we're having a great conversation. We're great friends. Not quite like the bottom one, but still in that it's positive, we're both enjoying it, we're both good. And then you can kind of see as you just keep going, you talked about the scale of feelings, or you use the
tone scale. Yeah.
Tone scale, yeah. So this is the same thing, just in a model that I can give to people and they can look at. And the idea is, you got to be aware of what floor you're on.
Yeah.
So you get up into the higher, I strongly dislike you, as what I'm thinking. The feeling is disgust, and the behavior is, I want to walk away. I want to get out of here. I don't want to be around you. Well, that all seems normal, right? And you get to the top level of, I effing hate you. I think I absolutely despise you. I'm feeling hatred toward you. I want to kill you. I want to throw you off the 10-story building. So if you're not aware of what floor you're on, it is impossible to use positive language that would come from floors 1 through 3 if you're on floors 4 through 6. Yeah. And absolutely freaking impossible to ever use love language if you're up there in the red zone. Mm-hmm. It's not happening.
Right.
Especially if you're both up there in the red zone. Elvis has to leave the building. It's time for somebody to leave the building, because we will only escalate. We'll only go higher if we both are in this embattled fight thing. So that's where at some point somebody runs. Or at some point somebody gives up and goes into freeze mode. I can't take this anymore. Mm-hmm. And I just cry, and I just feel so overwhelmed. And then the other person comes alongside them and kicks them a few more times, kick them when they're down. Get a few more good licks in there. And it isn't until literally all those chemicals have to be reabsorbed, and you can imagine little sacs in the brain that have like suction cups on them, or sponges out there, and they're gathering up like the little Pac-Man. That's a great analogy to think of Pac-Man going around and gathering up all of the cortisol, all the adrenaline, all the norepinephrine. That's what's making us act out in ways that is not very loving and not very civilized. So I love using that model and telling people, man, it only takes one person to recognize you're not on the green floors any longer, you're in the yellow floors. And it won't take much more to just keep riding the elevator up. And the thing that I love sharing, and I'm sharing it from personal experience, is that when I'm on those red floors, it is not even in my purview. It is not even possible on those floors to use loving, concerting, helpful, constructive.
No.
It's not there. It is literally there. There's no connection. It's like, and it's just, there's no way to get there.
Nope.
The only way is time.
Can't get there from here.
The only way is time.
And that's why I think it's, as you were talking, I was thinking about over the years, you hear these never go to bed angry, things that sound like, nice little
Right, but how's that
snippets.
going to work? So we'll fight all night.
Right,
Even though
which
what
is-
we really
which is
need
not
is
the
sleep.
point. Right.
And
The
what we
point is
really
that-
need is to de-escalate. Let's just stay up and fight all night.
There's the word, is the de-escalation. Is that somewhere in the mix, somebody has to be willing to step back, and I think that's why it's this core thing that I sort of live by: energy up, energy down. Energy up, energy down means down is anything that's negative or energy or in a way that pulls your energy down. Down meaning negative, in a negative fashion. So you may be amping up negatively, but your vibration is actually going down because you're getting denser. You're getting more. I don't know what the word is.
I love dense because I
Dense.
think of stupid.
Yeah.
You're like a rock. I have about as much intelligence right now as this rock. As a matter of fact, let me just pick it up and crush your skull with it.
At least it'll be useful for something. But that idea of when you get there, the best possible solution is to recognize you're there and stop that refractory period.
Yeah.
Or go into that place of you have to take yourself out of the energy space. Somebody does.
Yeah.
Hopefully you both can recognize it.
Which one of us has at least one brain cell?
Left. It can go, wait, this is getting us nowhere. And the cool thing, though, is that you can still get there even if you're escalating. As long as because by virtue of simply walking out of the situation and not engaging the energy is going to dissipate. The momentum is going to slow down.
Right.
Now, whether you're able, in the process of the momentum slowing, to be able, as the body's clearing the chemicals, if you're able to come back to center, then you can make some effective change. But if you can't find that center, that to me sounds like reigniting trauma. That sounds like somebody who's stuck in that emotional loop. You can't. It should be an organic thing that as you disengage from that energy and the momentum dissipates and the body starts collecting the chemicals, you should start feeling physically better. You should start noticing a change where you may not feel like I'm going to go run a race or I'm going to go do something exciting, but you'll feel more neutral.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll start to have more, well, maybe I shouldn't have said that, or maybe I should have conveyed something this way. The challenge with it is that once we get there and you start thinking those thoughts, then those thoughts can take you right back into what was triggering to begin with, because then you start arguing with yourself, because that muscle that you've trained for so long, and Joe talks about that too through the thing, is that it's going to override, it's going to take over, because it's what you know. So even if in the moment you're doing this and you go, wait, this is not working, I got to take it, and you take yourself out of the situation, if you don't do something to help the momentum shift, you'll probably end up back in the same place in some form or fashion, because you're going to keep trying to solve for X when X isn't where the problem is.
Mm-hmm.
X is what caused X is
right.
over here. And I really like that we have the ability to manage any and all of our experience in a very effective way when we're willing to be conscious of what our experience is. There's so much other crap that gets caught in the way of two human beings who have a fight. I recognize it in myself. If we're having an issue, that there's always this part of me that wants to go to a blame place, and typically with myself, that oh gosh, did you have to say that? Did you have to be such a dick? Couldn't you did it? Yeah, but they did it. And as soon as you go there with that argument, you're engaging the mind to re-engage the emotion.
Yeah.
And the mind will go, well, yeah, we just came there. It's easy to get there again. Here. And it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
But we have, the whole Adventures in Truth, the whole point of a lot of what we do is to say, hey, there are options every single time. And sometimes those options are, the adventure happens in understanding your own reaction. The adventure happens
Sure.
in stopping and saying, okay, I'm having this, and okay, I'm having it, but what is it? Where is it taking me? Where is it going to lead? Where is the end result of this going to be? Because regardless of how bright or not bright you think you are, you know your pattern. I think we all know our pattern. We just don't want to cop to it, because as soon as we cop to it, then we have to own that we are responsible for what we
Sure.
You know, and it all comes back. It seems to come back to that same place. You know, you come back to that same point of contention, which is, do I want to be responsible for creating my life, or do I want somebody else to be responsible for creating my life?
Yep. While we were chatting away, I had this visual of two old ships, back in the days when they had cannons on the ships. And let's say one ship is a merchant ship and the other ship is a pirate ship. And the pirate ship chases down the merchant ship and they start doing their gun battle. And at some point, the merchant ship puts up the white flag. I surrender. You know, it's not worth loss of life. So there's somebody with one brain cell that says, we got to level 10, but I can see that we're all going to lose here. And this isn't the outcome we want. So they stop fighting. They give the illusion that they stop. They take a timeout, right? So there's all these cannons that their fuses have been lit, but they all go and snuff the fuses out. So the fuses were a foot long, and now they're 3 inches long. The cannons have stopped firing. But the merchant ship tells everybody on the board, we still think they're trying to take what we want, and we're not giving it up. But let's fake dead for a little while. Let's take a timeout. Let's just try to see who's still alive, and can we really offer a counter response to this? But we're gonna take a timeout, because right now it's happening so fast, and there's so much carnage taking place. At this pace, it's an automatic win for them, because we're always in this win. In that state of mind, we're in a win-lose.
Yes.
We're not in a win-win.
Right.
It's always win-lose. So we're going to give the illusion of taking a timeout, which could be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, could be a day. But as soon as the appearance of fights back on again, because he wants what I have, whether that's time, attention, money, love, whatever it is, somebody wants something from us, and we either have a fair, agreed upon negotiation for exchanging that, or it feels like somebody's trying to take it from me or steal it from me, or I can't get it from them. They're giving it to somebody else. And so instantly those fuses get lit again. But they used to be 12 inches long. Now they're only 3 inches long. And bam, 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 bam. And you got this whole barrage
Instant
of cannon
escalation.
fire going back on again. Because the core issue was never dealt with, which is, you want something I have. I have something you want. And we haven't figured out how to negotiate that. And piracy is not an acceptable form of negotiation.
Well, and how many times has that happened in that we see it all the time in relationship? The re-escalation is always so much faster than.
Well, yeah, I still got my cannon pointed at you.
Yeah.
I may have snuffed out the fuse, and you went, whew, at least I don't see sparks any longer. Whew, that feels good. Not realizing it's now a 3-inch fuse, and they still got the fuse lighter lit. That hasn't been snuffed out, or the cannons haven't been withdrawn and the doors shut and disarmed and all that sort of thing. And can we give you half of our treasure and you'll kind of like go on your merry way? You know? No, I want it all.
Yeah. So you can't think greater than how you feel. What else is in here? 70% of what was it? 70% of our lives are spent in fear, conditioning the body to fear. Because the idea being that the emotion creates a chemistry, the chemistry trains the body then becomes the vehicle for the expression of whatever that is. Because it's been chemically induced to have a response.
Mm-hmm.
And so the longer you stay in that chemical response, so over the course of our lives, we spend 70% of our time there because from the other one, 95% of who we are by the age of 35 is memorized.
So those chemicals would be adrenaline, epinephrine, and norepinephrine. And just like any other chemical, the body has a baseline or a threshold, and it gets used to a certain amount of that being there.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's not there, that becomes a not normal.
That becomes a threat to survival. Ultimately.
Even though it's unhealthy,
Right.
it becomes a not normal. So I'm actually more comfortable living in chaos because that's my normal, where all these chemicals, I know how to manage this level of chemical. I don't know how to deal with peace and tranquility and harmony and love. So I just reinvent it. I recreate it all of the time. And what's fascinating to me about fear is it's all make-believe. It's all imagined.
Yes.
Fear's not real.
Right.
Danger's real. Fear's not.
I wrote a book about that. Fear is a
Yes,
choice.
you did.
I did. And it's damn good. But I like that.
70%. That's sad. There's only love or fear. So they're saying you're at the most in either a neutral place or love only 30% of the time.
Well, I think he was talking in broader terms. I think that he was looking at the arc of most human experience.
Right. So I'm just thinking of the higher brain living and prefrontal cortex is in the now, in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
It's having an experience that is not fear-based. The only way to be using your prefrontal cortex is you cannot be in fear. Once fear is experienced by the amygdala, hypothalamus, and thalamus,
You're out.
prefrontal cortex through the ventral vagal nerve gets shut off,
Yes.
and you're only acting like a mammal,
Yes.
and you're either going to fight it, freeze, or run away. Those are the only three choices, and that's fear. So 70% of the time, we're fighting something, running away from something, or freezing and doing nothing, hoping it'll get better tomorrow. That's a big chunk of time. It takes a lot of energy to be in that place, which is why people would eat too much, smoke too much, drink too much, masturbate too much, whatever too much to try to self-medicate
Yep.
the body's being overwhelmed.
Well, and it's also trying to, interestingly enough, all of those examples are trying to combat chemicals with chemicals.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to defeat the body's natural mechanism by adding more chemicals to dumb down the process, which
Sure.
only further exacerbates
Sure.
the issue. But interestingly, that we didn't really discuss, and now we can. What is the thing you can't think greater than how you feel? So where he goes at the end of this experience, and I think is really critical to this whole process, is the only way that changes is through shifting state.
Mm-hmm. To me, that would be changing the floor.
Changing the floor. Well, shifting.
floor
No,
you want?
actually, no. It's a whole different deal. To me, it's not changing floors. It's in that analogy, it would have to be because. All right, let me take a step back. So we were talking about the fight or flight experience and the prefrontal cortex and what that's about. It's not about not fear. It's about opportunity. Because the reason I say that is because you're not looking for how to not have fear. You're looking for what is absent. What is it to be absent of fear? What is it to not have that be the core response, so that when a bill shows up that you don't expect, that you can observe it as a thing in the field of your experience and go, oh, I didn't expect that. Why is this here? Maybe I need to do something. I need to look into this.
Right.
And so it becomes just a cause and response thing. You just, oh, okay, this showed up. Because I'm in a centered place, I can look at that and go, that's a thing I need to address. So what am I going to address it now? No, I'm going to put it down because I'm a human being that has lived so much life. So that large bill is still going to cause a response in my body. Because in the past, I've had bills before I came to a point where I could manage it. That response is still there. But the difference is that when you shift state, you're no longer run by that process.
Mm-hmm.
You go, oh, that's happening, and my attention is here. Oh, there's a response going on over here. I'm not engaging that. I'm engaging solution. I'm engaging opportunity. I'm engaging something else. So the shifting state piece, in the analogy of the building, I'm trying to find, as I'm talking, it's not, you're not, shifting state is leaving the building. Shifting state is going down, is from wherever you are, leaving the building. It's finding the fire escape, it's taking the elevator, it's jumping out the window, it's whatever you got to do to not be there is shifting state in a positive fashion. Not so killing yourself is not necessarily the way that would go. To me, it would be taking yourself out of the circumstance that's causing the reaction, so that you can create space and distance to be able to once again see it as something that's in the field of your awareness. So, oh, look, I have this emotional tone scale that I can observe, and I notice that this triggered me here. Okay, I don't need to stay there.
Right.
I can shift state and remove my energy from that I'm having trouble with words tonight.
Yeah.
But removing from that, but the thing about shifting state is it's almost, and I hesitate to use this word, but it's almost a magical experience. So it's not that you have to find an escape route. It's that you choose to engage your energy in a way that shifts your state. Shifting state meaning that you are no longer in the receptive mode of fear. You're in the receptive mode of something else. And that something else is outside the realm of all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So you can, within the context of that building, you can find a quiet corner and sit and shift state and get out of the building. And then once you're out of the building, you can decide if you want to go back in and ground, and then you can go back and walk in the front door of the building into the love zone when you're ready to do that, because you've taken yourself out of that energy, or you've shifted your vibration so that you and it are not compatible anymore. And in doing that, you have the ability to then place yourself wherever you want to, because you're now no longer tied to that chemical reaction.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does.
So I hate to say magical, because it isn't woo-woo. It's not you don't have to be gifted to get there from here. You just have to make the choice. You just have to be willing to find the tool, and many say meditation does that.
Mm-hmm.
And
breathing
does that.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of ways to get there.
Yeah.
Tapping. But there are a ton of modalities that help people that can help us individually to get there. But the trick is remembering that you created the state. You have to uncreate what you've done. So you could go get a massage, but the massage therapist isn't going to massage your fear away. You may, in the
Unless
context
you come
of,
see me, I'll give you a mental massage.
well,
and we can do it that
my
way.
point is that it's not that the massage is invaluable. It's, can you, in the context of that feel-good thing, find a new state to be in?
Right.
Or are you going to lay there and allow the chemicals to continue to stimulate you?
Right. So in that model I was sharing with you, leaving the building isn't an option. You only have floors 1 through 10 to be on your entire life. When you leave the green floors, otherwise known as the land of content, I can do this, I'll figure it out, I can deal with this, and you get into the yellow and red floors in the land of discontent, that's a state change, going from discontent to content. And we have agreed that you can't think your way through that. It's the recognition, or it's just like if you went out and ran as hard as you could for as long as you could, there'd be a point at which your body would say, what are you doing? You're gonna kill me. You gotta slow down. You gotta stop. And there's some point through pain, usually, that tells, I can't do this any longer. And if you keep going, you'll fall down on the ground. I mean, Wasn't the marathon invented from some guy running 26.2 miles and delivering the message and dying, and that became the standard for, oh, I want to try that.
Seriously?
It killed, yeah, that was a, it was a
Never heard
messenger
that.
in battle, like,
Wow.
this is important. All these people will die. Send the message to this general. Run as fast as you can. And he did. Delivered the message and died. And that became the standard for the marathon. 26.2 miles. Not 26.1, not 26. It was measured. It was so
Wow.
impressive. Apparently it saved lives. And that became the standard for the marathon. So he somehow, through his willingness to save other people, rose above himself and ignored all of those messages that his body was saying, this is going to kill you, you've got to stop. Or he just had a bad heart and died. I don't know. We weren't there. We can't ever recreate that. But it's interesting that there's a point at which for most of us we can recognize, I can't keep doing this. I don't want to keep doing this. Oh, I recognize I was right here last week. How about I don't stay up so late tonight? Because I really do have something important to do tomorrow, and the sun's still going to come up.
So in your building, where is that happening? Because if you're at the 7th floor, you've got to. It's not impossible, but it's virtually impossible to stay in the environment and affect change.
No, you can't. That's why you've got to go down on the floors. You don't need the other person to go with you. You have to be willing to say, before I ever met this person, I was okay. I can go, I choose, because I'm fatigued, I'm weary, I'm learning. I can just keep going, but then I'm just making it worse. We're going to be on floor 8 next, and then 9, and then I will throw them off the building or something.
So are you then saying that, in essence, so the elevator, you have a key for the elevator, and when you're in the 6th, 7th, 8th floor, you forget you have a key.
And you forget all the vocabulary on the lower floors. You can't be nice.
Right.
There's no nice.
So what gets you to the elevator when you're on the 7th floor?
To go up or down?
To go down. So what happens in the building? What can you do that enables you to at least go, I can't stay here anymore?
So number one, it's the awareness of the model and having at least one brain cell on that this is only, the elevator and really only goes in one direction by itself. By itself, it only goes up. And when you say, oh, this is a two-way elevator, and I'm willing to take, instead of they're going to solve my problem, and instead of making them responsible, it's like, I'm going to own this shit. Then you have the key to the elevator.
Good. So,
and you may only get down one floor at a time, but at least they're still on floor 7, or maybe they've gone to 8, but now you're creating separation from the stimulus.
Yes.
We get back to that refractory thing
Yep.
that we were talking about earlier. And you start breathing, or maybe you tap, or maybe you do some meditation, or maybe you just go to sleep. Maybe you go for a walk, hit a punching bag, so many different ways. And then you get to floor 6 and 5. But you're going to have to take time. You really can't go from 7 to 3
no.
that fast.
No.
It's going to take some time.
Yeah,
and you have to be willing to be pissed off and feel all that crap because you did it.
Right. It's there for you for a purpose. I mean, the creation of it is still a value because it's the understanding that comes from doing that, from recognizing I can't stay here, to how can I change this, to I'm going to take the elevator down. I haven't done that before. To all of those are discoveries. All of those are points of enlightenment, essentially, in each individual that are critical in understanding personal mastery. Because we recognize that I can be in the 7th floor and the fucker can be on fire, and I can still stop and go, I know there is a way out of this building. I know there is a way down.
Sure.
I don't know how to get there from here yet, but I swear somebody told me there was a trick, and that's when you kind of go, wait, what's that? There's a key. Oh.
Yeah.
And you begin in that framework too.
I love that you brought up fire, so I think of a fire drill. And at some point you recognize that the fire alarm is going off. And you do need to get off that floor.
You don't want to burn. Good stuff. Let's see what else.
You said something else in there that was provocative.
Not the P word.
Yeah, it was. What the heck else was it about the... So could we agree that state change would be going from discontent to content, or vice versa, content to discontent? That would, if we could make it as simple as possible, that those would be, you could either talk about as love and fear, or content versus discontent, and that the discontent shows up for us so that we can learn to map our way back to content. We have to. We have to carry a map with us. We have to carry signs and symbols and recognitions, or we're just going to keep going down that path that leads right to the cliff, and we're going to jump. And we usually want to take somebody with us.
Yeah, virtually every time.
Only every time?
Yeah, only.
Okay, only every time.
Virtually, yeah. I mean, that's really good. There was somewhere else I was wanting to...
Didn't Hansel and Gretel do that with breadcrumbs?
What's that?
The nursery rhyme, Hansel and Gretel.
Yeah.
They went through the forest and they knew that they needed to find their way back, so they laid down breadcrumbs, and they didn't know that there were birds coming behind them eating the breadcrumbs. So there has to be more than one way. Breadcrumbs alone will not get you back to floors 1 and 2.
Well, I want to
or
go back to what you were saying, how you started that, because you used an either or.
Content, discontent, love, or fear.
Yeah, content and discontent.
As I was just trying to simplify the state, because I like the state change. That model that I wrote with the 10 buildings is actually called state-based accession. That was the name of the model. So that's
state-based what?
Accession. You're accessing different states. You can access these states or these states.
So you were likening each floor to a different state?
Yeah. But they were, I made 10 levels of it, so it wasn't just floor 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Love and fear, or content and discontent. I wanted to have some spread or some range in there.
Well, the place that I got a little hung up was I was trying to determine, when you're saying content versus discontent, is it really that, or is it getting to a place of neutral, which then allows you to make different choices? Because...
Yeah, there's probably a null zone in there.
Because contentment, again, I don't know that you can get from discontent to content
without moving through the refractory period, otherwise known as the null zone.
Yes.
Did we just solve it? Did we just kind of like figure that out? Yeah.
I think we did, because that's the place where the shift change then gives you opportunity. That's why I call it an opportunity-based experience. It doesn't answer all your questions, and it doesn't solve all your problems. It gives you the opportunity to make different choices. And it gives you the opportunity to allow what is unknown to become known. And that only happens when you can slow down this mechanism in the brain that is attached to the emotional trigger that's caused because of the chemical responses that are going on. And please understand, to the listener, we're not giving credence to the chemicals being an excuse, because the chemicals were created because you made a choice. The chemicals are there because you chose to go where you went, and the body responded to that in its natural form. So the responses are completely organic and natural, positively or negatively. It just depends on which way you go. If you go positively, you're going to get more of the endorphins, you're going to get more of the dopamine, you're going to get more of those good things. If you go the other direction, you're going to get the adrenaline, you're going to get those types of things.
Right.
So the state change provides to me a state of neutrality in it that allows you to see all of it. And when you can see it from that broader perspective, when you can experience it that way, you begin. That's that expression I was using of it becomes a thing in the field of your awareness.
Right.
And when it all becomes things in the field of your awareness, then you can kind of spin the dial and go, which one makes me feel best? Which one is most satisfying? Which one is which brings most contentment? Which can bring the most? What's going to bring win-win in this situation? That's something for me that's very critical, particularly in relationship. Is I'm very cautious of what I bring to conversation if I can't see the win-win at the end of the conversation. So if I'm having an issue and I have that conversation and I'm sitting with myself and I'm contemplating, what's going on for me and how I'm feeling and what's happening, and what do I want? What is it I'm looking for? Well, if the looking for is that they have to change, then I'm in the wrong. I'm in the wrong park. So I got to go back. Okay, that's not it. So I haven't taken it to me yet. I haven't brought it home. I'm having the issue. I'm having the experience. I'm having the feeling. It's all my. They may be doing something that's stimulating that, but I'm having it. I'm choosing that response, regardless of whether I want to own that I'm choosing it. I'm still choosing it. It may be part of the subconscious and conscious process that's happening, but that was put there by me. Mm-hmm. So it's still mine. It's still my process to unfold. So coming to neutral allows us to see that, all of it more neutrally, and then to look for those places where, look for the satisfaction. Look for where am I going to feel most satisfied, and where are we both going to feel most if it's in context of relationship. How can I approach this that we're both end up satisfied? Satisfied or content are challenging words because my version of contentment and someone else's version of contentment may be very different. It isn't that I'm determining what their contentment is. I'm creating the space for maximum possibility.
So I have found that goal that you have is not going to happen at the same time for two people in relationship.
No.
As much as that's a desire, particularly with if you enter the masculine and the feminine energies into that, masculine can go from one extreme to the other very, very quickly, and vice versa. And feminine energy takes time to get there, but once there, takes a long time to get out of there.
Yes.
It's just been my experience to observe that. I don't know if there's science to support that, but there probably is if we looked for it. So hoping that we can all patch things up and just hug and sing Kumbaya, get back to our nice date tonight, ain't gonna happen.
Right.
Maybe tomorrow night we could regroup, and we have to let go of that you ruined the night mentality, or trying to save the night. The night is probably not, the expectation of it being what we wanted it to be. We have to accept that that's probably not going to happen, or it's going to be really late, and we're doing it because we're so fatigued and we both just give up and kiss and make up. But we really didn't. The cannons are still pointed at each other and the fuses are just shorter, and we just know that the battle's going to start again tomorrow. So it's a false refractory period, if you will. So that's part of just, I can be content without the need to know that the other person is content too. And that's really hard to do, because when we love somebody and we know they're discontent and we're empathic, we're going to feel their discontent, which pulls us right back into it again.
Can, for sure.
Can, yes. And we have to resist that temptation. It's like, hey, it's your hell. If you want to be there, I got to love you enough to let you be there.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean I have to be there with you.
Yes. A perfect example is this move. I mean, an immediate example that you can use in relationship. This has been a very challenging process for Michael, and a very challenging process for me. I mean, just because I made the decision doesn't mean that it was an easy one, or that it is an easy process.
Sure, for either of you.
For either of us.
Yeah.
But
it's not easy for me too.
Right?
You left me out of this.
But the thing that is so important to recognize is we both get to have it however we need to have it.
But I don't.
Well, you get to have it however you need to have it too. But in the context of our relationship, because I instigated this change, I have to own all of the ramifications of that change.
Mm-hmm. You do.
It doesn't mean that I am responsible for his choices, but I am responsible for creating the environment in which he's making choices. And therefore, I have to create as much space as I can to allow for whatever response
you
he's
set
having.
it in motion.
Yes. And when you own it, it doesn't necessarily make it easier, but it makes it smoother, because you don't spend time being tortured by that.
Yeah.
It's just it's the place that you're talking about. It's that place of, it's okay for you to have that, and I love you for having it. And if there's some way I can help shift it without making you wrong, making you bad, making you feel like you're being stupid, then I'll do that. But if I can't, then it's not a win-win. So all I can do is show up in love in that point.
Sure.
And every now and again, it doesn't work.
Right. Yeah.
Every now and again, my humanness shows up, and my field gets full of my emotional debris, and
Yeah.
you know.
Well, wouldn't the course of action or the flow chart be, I'm really afraid they won't be able to join me in being content with this, that he or she won't get there with me. I'm afraid that there's no indicators to suggest that they'll get there, and I'm afraid that this will be the end of it.
Yeah. Well, and absolutely, and so interesting that you say that, because it's, for me, interestingly enough, is one of the bizarre benchmarks of clarity for me, because knowing what I know I need to do and recognizing that if he comes or doesn't come, I still need to do it, that sucks.
Yeah.
That sucks big ass, and I'm saying it out loud, but it's still real. It's that, oh my God, regardless of, if doesn't matter what he does, this has to occur.
Right.
Now, that changes everything I do going forward, as far as, because I really want him there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not about making it hard and arduous and nasty and miserable, and picking and fussing and being all up in his space because he's not being the way I think he should be about it. It's, how are you today?
Yeah.
How's the movement today? Can we do anything today? You know, are you good today? You know, how are we today? You know, how are we interacting? How's the language?
Yeah.
How's the, you know?
Well, talk for a second about how you've watched Michael go through this with you. To in the beginning, perhaps like, what the fuck, are you crazy? Or why would you even suggest that? To, he's actually going to do it with you. So how did you guys get to that point?
Largely, I think the way we got, or at least the way I got there, was recognizing and being willing to let him have his process. At the same time, I have to be willing to stand in my... There are some things that aren't acceptable. I think you, and as we talked about earlier, a couple incidences, things that are obvious to me as his ways of paying me back for making him uncomfortable. While those suck, I try not to spend a lot of time on them, but they still have to be called out.
Okay. So
because they interfere
you
with
made
the process.
him uncomfortable, so he thinks he has to pay that back in some way. There has to be some...
I don't know if he
now
thinks that. I don't know if it's a thought process.
Yeah,
I think it's just, I'm struggling, and you're the reason. This doesn't feel good right now, and you're the reason it doesn't feel good. Because if you hadn't made this decision and told me that we're moving, I wouldn't have to be feeling these feelings. I wouldn't have to be dealing with my mom feeling like I'm abandoning her, or whatever.
Sure. Yeah, the whole uncertainty principle.
Yeah. And listening to our friends, and watching our roommate, go through her paces about this change, because it's big for all of us. And there has been more than one occasion that I stopped and went, what have I done? What have I done? And then
what have you done? I want to hear the answer to that. What have you done?
What I've done is followed my clarity, followed my truth. Mm-hmm. And
what a bad man you are for that.
And they all have the opportunity, and or whatever, however they choose to look at it. But to me, it's the opportunity is, do you get on board or do you not get on board?
Sure.
And there's no wrong answer.
Right.
And that's the other piece of this that I think is so important, is that if Michael should choose not to go, that's not a bad thing. It's not great. It's not good for our relationship, but it's not bad that he would choose that, because that's his truth. Right. And that's what's right for him.
Right.
Just like, we thought Michelle was our roommate, we thought she was going to go with us. She's lived with us for 6 years, and it's an awesome situation. She's an amazing person, and we do it well together, we support each other, and it's a very familial kind of feeling. But when she came to her clarity, she had a hard time with it initially, because she would say, when it came up about her going with us, her response was very, very virulent, very, I'm not going. And so finally one night I sat down and I said, can we talk about this? Because I'm confused why you're not going. And here's my story. This is what I said to her. I said, this is my version of the story. So I made all this up, and you can tell me how much I'm crazy. But I said, you work a job you hate, you have a boss you hate, you have the opportunity to take a leave of absence. Why aren't you taking it? You can take a leave of absence and maybe even find a job that you really like. And I said, and that's my version of the story. I don't know how real it is, but that's what I keep hearing in my head, so I wanted to talk about it with you and see where you are. And then she came back with a very lucid, very clear explanation that actually touched me deeply, because she's found a family, an extended family, and friends and things that she has not had in her adult life. Mm-hmm. And now she's surrounded by this group of people that love her and enjoy her, and they have, and so she doesn't want to leave that. She doesn't want to give that up to go exploring in Colorado. But having that dialogue dissipated that energy to the degree that now she doesn't have that edge to her anymore. But now there's still moments of sadness and moments of confusion and moments of overwhelm and moments of, I'm having the same things. I had to have that conversation with Mike. It's like, dude, yeah, I made the decision. It doesn't mean it's any easier for me. I'm taking my steps.
Yeah.
But because I chose that, now I have the additional responsibility or burden to honor the other people who are impacted by my choice.
Sure.
And that's a big deal. But if I was stuck here, if I was stuck in that loop end of thinking that I had to, whatever that says again that I keep forgetting, I don't know why. Can't think greater than how I feel. If I was stuck in the emotion of it, mm-hmm. I would not be effective at all, and we would fight a lot.
Sure.
and we would probably end up not talking to each other.
Yeah, if you were both in
Again.
that 70% experience of living your life in fear, that's going nowhere.
Yeah. And I find, as hard as it is sometimes, the clarity that I maintain is the thing that helps everybody find their bearing, because I carry that consistently. So I may have my private moments of like, oh my God, but for the most part, I stay clear, and every day I take steps toward what I have to do. Mm-hmm. Whether it's packing something or taking something apart or going through stuff or whatever it is I got to do each day to forward that process. But what I think it does is it creates that space that we're talking about between positive and negative, that neutral place where they can still have their experience without it being negative. Yeah. It's just part of the change process.
Right. I use this personal stress monitor when I'm doing trauma remediation with people. They wear it on their ear. It measures pulse. It measures heart rate variability. It measures the frequency at which the pulse is being transmitted. And I think you might have seen it, but it's probably been a while. But one of the presentations is the autonomic nervous system, and it's laid out across the bottom of the screen. And there's these bars, and they're all going up, and the range is measured in hertz, which is a unit of measure to measure brain activity. Mm-hmm. I don't ask people to practice 0 hertz because that's clinical death. That's one of the things we don't do in my practice. Maybe someday we can do that and get into... I'm failing to make a joke right now. You're not even smiling. Usually people laugh when I say we're not going to practice clinical death. But anyway, between 0 and 4 hertz is what this personal stress monitor does. And again, it's just a little light sensor that you clip onto your earlobe, and HeartMath chose to use that source of pulse to create their system. But it shows bars, and we want low bars, meaning these bars that are dynamic and they're constantly changing. They're going up and down. And you have the fight response on one side, and you have the runaway response on the other side. And in the middle, you have what we call the null zone. And the idea is you want low or no bars in fight, no or low bars in runaway,
Mm-hmm.
and high bars in the null zone. And in addition to that, we have a frequency sweep. And anyway, it's just interesting that something that I've been using for a long time kind of ties into this conversation that we're having, that the goal would be to be in that refractory or that null zone no matter what's going on around you. So for people that have traumas of being in a fatal car crash where somebody died and they tell me, there was fluid all over, I smelled radiator fluid, I smelled gasoline. So I'll actually have them go back and recount this experience. And because I have a shop associated with my practice, I'll go get some gasoline and I'll have them smell it. And I'll go get some radiator fluid and I'll have them smell it. And I'll put on the sounds of a car crash. I'll have that going. I'll find a YouTube video that will demonstrate all that. So they're hearing it, they're thinking about it, they're smelling the different smells. And if I can get them to show that they're in the null zone, the trauma's cleared. And that's really a fun, that's kind of
cool.
graduate level
Yeah.
trauma processing, so they can know when I smell radiator fluid, gasoline, or those things, I'm not instantly going to think about my brother who lost his life in our car accident, and I lived, and I have survivor's guilt, or all the others. It was my fault, or all the other stuff that goes along with that. We're thinking that at any moment, some car can come flying over the thing and hit us again like it did once before, and I don't feel safe ever, right? So the null zone.
The null zone, I like that. Shift state. Shifting state. Well,
And you're going to do that. You're going from California to Colorado.
wise ass. Yes, I am physically shifting state as well as all the other stuff. So there's a lot to this, and I think we can tie it later as we go further. But I think we touched on the things that I really wanted to dive into, at least in this initial thing, as it's tied into so many of the things that we're talking about. Is there anything else with regard to this that you want to bring to the table and hash through?
Yeah. For me personally, the opportunity to have a sparring partner is invaluable. If you're a fighter, if you're a boxer, even if you're into the keto, which is you don't go out and attack people, but you know that you have an effective way of defending yourself from an attack. Because there are attacks in life. You're going to be attacked. You go into the jungle, the tiger's going to stalk you and attack you at times. And you don't want to have to go in there thinking, I got to shoot the tiger, but I want to be able to protect myself. So the opportunity to be in a relationship to where you know that no matter what's going on, you can stay in the null zone, to me that's invaluable.
Mm-hmm.
An example of that would be occasionally I'm called upon to be an expert witness in court to give testimony of which parent is more qualified to have custody of their kid. And that is an awful environment. That you can feel it. It's just like, the judge isn't happy about it. Nobody's happy about it. And I know that there's an attorney there that wants to hear my testimony and knows it's going to build and support their case. And there's an attorney there that knows everything I have to say is going to go against them, so they're going to try to attack me, discredit me, tarnish my reputation, whatever strategy. And so, I've learned this tapping technique that while I'm in the witness stand, I'm moving my toes up and down in one foot and then up and down in another foot, and I bring up this image of a place that I've practiced going to in my mind many, 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 many times, that I'm safe. I'm safe physically, I'm safe emotionally, I'm safe spiritually. And I'm having, because I've done it so many times, as soon as I start doing that, my physiology, my makeup, my personality, my mindset is there, even though I'm sitting in the courtroom. But I'm present enough in the courtroom that I can answer questions, I can participate, I can smile, I can nod my head. And my true best self is not in fight mode, because I'm not effective there, and I'm not effective in runaway mode. I'm not effective as a combatant. I'm effective in, I can be on the battlefield and I can shift people's, because Aikido is about
That's
using
Aikido,
the other
using the energy.
Yeah,
Yep.
using their energy to direct it away from you, and not to go face to face or head on with them. And that's a wonderful skill to learn how to do. And over time, I don't go out of my way to take those cases because they're not fun, even though I've learned how to be good at it. It takes a toll on you, and you kind of want to not do a whole bunch of those. So that's really my wrap up on the whole thing, is there is a value to being on the battlefield at times, being in the boxing ring, if you will, in relationships, no matter whether they're interpersonal or intimate or collegial or corporate or whatever. That's where we learn how to regulate ourselves. And it's as much as I've learned to drive a boat, go fishing at nighttime, fly a plane, all these different skills and capabilities that I've gone out of my way to learn how to do, it feels nice to know that I can do that. Mm-hmm. And in my relationship and personal life and spiritual life, I'm directing my attention there to learn to be in that null zone, no matter how many grenades or bombs or machine guns are pointed my way, or landmines I'm standing on, or whatever, to be at peace with that and
it's that
operate in my highest self.
It's just one more thing in the field of your awareness.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yep, I agree. So we sign off tonight with our Adventures in Truth podcast, and put another plug in for the podcast, as well as finding it on Facebook.
Yeah, check out our Facebook page at Adventures in Truth. I don't know if it's .com, because it's not a website yet. But we've got our Facebook page and our YouTube page, which is where you'll currently find all of our 22 or 23 sessions.
Yeah.
Is also Adventures in Truth, and soon we will also be showing up in podcast lands. Don't know where yet, but we're learning. So, but this is good stuff. This has been a great conversation about really diving into this this whole idea of you can't think your way out of how you feel. Was it? No, it's even better than that. You can't think greater than how you feel.
Yeah. Yep.
Love that.
All
So
right,
thanks everybody
Mr.
for
Jim.
joining us. Jeff, awesome as usual. Thank you very much.
You are welcome, and thank you for the stimulating conversation.
It was fantastic.
Good night, all.
Good night.